Well, first of all, thank you very much, Johnny, for asking me to do this talk in this amazing barn, and with this wonderful studio behind us and everything. It's just fantastic, and I am very happy that you've asked me, and thank you for coming. A little bit about me. I've been in the business of interior decorating for about 20, 30 years, and the last 20 of them, my partner, who you can see on the screen there grinning away, is Kate Earle, and we have a company called Todhunter Earle. And we are lucky enough to do projects, big projects all over, mostly in England actually, but all over the world as well. And most of those projects are of a certain size that we work with architects on, I would say, nearly all of them. And so that's why Johnny has kindly asked me here today, is to try and explain how it works between an architect and a designer, how we collaborate on a job. And actually, I'm sure he wants me to tell you when it goes wrong, and the thorny issue of the sort of the grey area between the interior designer and architect. And what I won't do is that, because then I won't get any more jobs, and that'll be it. So I'll be very careful what I say. But in fact, truthfully, it's usually a very happy collaboration. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my assistant here to flick pictures while I'm talking, because I'm hoping that the people on Zoom, I'll then get put down to a small icon in the corner of their screen rather than larger than life face on, and that would make me feel a lot better. So if you flick one every few minutes, then you'll see some pictures, and then you won't have to look at me, which will make me feel a lot more relaxed. So the way it works with an architect is we are brought in as interior designers as a consultant, in the same way as you have a whole team of consultants on every job. So audio-visual consultants, lighting designers, structural engineers, planning consultants, all of them, we're all a big team, but we have one headmaster or headmistress, and that is the lead consultant, and that person is usually the architect. So they are very, they have a very important job, because they have to take all the information from all of us, which we feed up to them, and they have to then coordinate all that information and put it into plans, elevation sections, drawings from which the house can be built or renovated. So the architect has this massive job, and we have really quite a small job by comparison, just providing the aesthetic intent and the aesthetic advice. The point is that the architect, therefore, is extremely busy at the beginning of a project and all the way through the project with this great responsibility. And we come in at a point, or should come in, as early as possible, because what they don't really have the time to do, and we do have the time to do, and we make sure we do it really well, is to understand the people who are going to be living in the house. So that is our massive job at the beginning of the project, is to understand the people and their, that person, that couple, their animals, their staff, if they're lucky enough to have any, their children, their life, what they do in the house, what they want to feel, their phobias, their all sorts of things come into the equation, and we have to really get under the skin of those people, and that the whole situation that they have, and try and understand what they want their house to be like. So while the architect is designing and making the outside of the building look beautiful, we're having to make sure that the inside is not only beautiful but really works for the family that are there. So we then have the responsibility of doing that, and we do it, but then we've got to find a way of putting it onto paper in such a way that we can convey that information to the architect and to the wider team, and so that they can then weave our vision of the interior into their architecture. And as we go through, I will explain how we do that. And I think the best way for me to do this is to tell the story of maybe 4 projects where we've quietly influenced the architecture of the house, and I think I think by the end of it you'll probably see how important it is for there to be an interior designer on the project, involved in the project from the beginning, because we're sort of the conduit to the client. Here we are in Chelsea. So this is a project that is in the heart of London, and it is a very unusual house, because you approach it through a door in a wall. It's as if it doesn't, it's a sort of secret door in the wall. It's got a garden front and back, and it is basically 1 room deep, 2 stories, very long and thin, built over what was 4 gardens sandwiched between 2 rows of terraced houses. And when I was brought on, the owner had lived there before, and it was a sort of sweet, lovely, quite chintzy cottage. And at the time, he had, and we all thought it was lovely, by the way, but he at the time had a new girlfriend who luckily isn't here, so I can say that she's very sophisticated, very cool, very contemporary in her taste, also a marvellous cook and a fantastic gardener, and really good at entertaining. And whereas he loved this much cosier, more traditional environment with all his books and things and piles of papers, she sort of swung into action and said, I think we should basically knock the whole thing down. So it was then at the beginning a sort of slightly a bit of a balancing act between how and a challenge to work out how to make the house work for both of them, because they were so different as people. Happily, they both did share a love of, and happily for Messums actually too, they did share a love of sculpture and art, paintings and things, and lots of other things. But for her, the main thing was that the house was laid out wrong. It felt wrong to her that the kitchen was downstairs and didn't relate to the garden. And the top floor didn't relate to the garden either, because the garden was sort of at a halfway level. So from the basement part, you had to go up to the garden, and from the top, you had to go down to the garden, and you never felt part of it. So I was brought in and had this great challenge, and literally went away, and on the back of a sick bag in a plane, I remember scribbling away, and came up with a real radical redesign, which I brought back to London, and they loved it, and the architects loved it as well and bought into it, and we almost, it almost came out the way I conceived of it there in that plane. So this is interesting. So now you're looking at the screen, and you've walked into the house, and you're in a very sort of somber holding space, dark blue hallway, and there's a glimpse through to the back of the house, because what we did, my scheme on the back of the sick bag, was that we literally chopped the back of the house off. We made it all glass, and we created a mezzanine floor so that you walked straight out into the garden, and you felt part of the garden from all levels. And so as you go through, this is the hallway, rather quiet, dark holding space, and then you go through to this, and now I'm going to sort of introduce someone else in our life who's actually here, Marianne Topham, who helps me. If I have these ideas, I draw badly in perspective, and she draws well in perspective, and so this helps us visualize. It's very quick, very speedy, much quicker than drawing on a computer. And so any little changes the client wants to make, you can just literally rub it out and develop the design together. So then if you can see how that room then worked out, it's suited them very well. It's full of lovely things. It's sort of maximalist contemporary, and lots and lots of character. And in the middle of the house is a great big Lightwell, which has got an enormous water sculpture by Jordi Raga, who you've exhibited here. Outside, absolutely incredible. But all of this is a balancing act, because I'm balancing them, the two people, and their likes and dislikes, and I'm balancing the rough with the smooth and the contemporary and the traditional. So this has got cherry-coloured velvet walls and a great big slab of elm desk, and then this incredible contemporary sculpture to your left. And you're now moving through the house, which is completely open plan. And the other thing that I did was I realised that the stairs, which were in the middle of this very long, thin house, were so limiting, because you felt trapped at both ends. So I changed the whole idea, just sort of quietly suggesting that this was a good idea, and everyone fell for it, that it was better to have a staircase at both ends of the house, one at the far end, one at the near end. So it was like a circular space, so that you just have it's extraordinary. You have a much better feeling for it. So then this takes you into the kitchen. You begin to see the glass, the crystal window right at the back, which opens with these huge sliding windows. And then if you flick, there we go, then you see how it worked out. So really these visuals are very much part of the way we work with the architect. And the architect can take these visuals, and from that he can do, or he or she, I should say, can do the drawings which become the working drawings for the build.
Amazing.
So going through from that shows you the kitchen, and then this is the type of drawing we would do. It shows how we created this mezzanine to get the connection through to the glass on the side, and then how it goes on down the stairs. So you never walk down steep stairs, 2 levels. You go down in stages, 6 steps, then pause on the mezzanine, then 6 steps down. So it didn't feel at any point you were really getting into a basement, which is a much nicer feeling, because no one likes to be underground. So carrying on through, that shows how we had a gallery after that table. There's a glass gallery, and you feel like you're in the garden, even though you're 6 steps higher. And that's our drawings of the back of the house, how we imagined it might look. And then I think you'll see that that's pretty much how it ended up looking. So the story, I think, carries on just a bit through. We see the bedroom. We saw the amazing Jordi sculpture, which was craned into the house. Absolutely, sort of a very brave move. And the story of this house really has quite a happy ending, because somewhere about 3/4 of the way through, they did get married, and they sometimes say that it's because they were enjoying the whole process, and the house is enough to know they had some common ground at least. So there we go. So moving swiftly on, this shows you there with this lovely staircase coming back up to the hall with a lovely Bill Amberg wrapped leather handrail, and back up to the hall where you came back in. So now we've done the circle of the house, and you're back in that hall where we started. So that's the looking back from the garden to remind us. So my next story is, how are we doing for time? Not too bad. My next story is of something completely different, not a contemporary house in London, a massive country house, Madresfield Court. It's a well-known house. It's open to the public. It's a beautiful moated house in Worcestershire, and it too has a happy ending to its story. But at one point during its history, it had a very unhappy time. It's the story that Evelyn Waugh based Brideshead Revisited on, and the Beauchamp family, Lord Beauchamp, who lived there, was this sort of incredible character, absolutely wonderful, but he brought sort of great shame at the time on the house because he was bisexual, and he was sent away under the cover of darkness to Paris, where he wasn't allowed into England because of this great shame. And the house had a sort of heady moment, which was the sort of Brideshead story just after he left, but actually it all went into terrible sadness and disrepair. It was mothballed, covered in dust sheets, and when I was brought in to help bring it back to life for the family, which, by the way, it's been the same family for over 1,000 years, but it hadn't had anybody living there properly, no children there for over 100 years, and literally it was as if they'd walked out and left it, and we had to create a really happy family house. Now, for a start, it was incredibly spooky. I mean, it was the most spooky. I'm not like that. I don't really feel it, but I felt it big time. And on top of that, the architects who'd come up with the original scheme had designed it. It's enormous. It's got moated, but around this big central courtyard. So it really takes a long time to get to the front door from the main bedroom. And they'd done this really pretty sort of strange plan where they'd put the kitchen into the old servants' kitchen where the windows were up high. You couldn't see out. They were freezing cold, north-facing, probably the nastiest room in the house. And I went for my first meeting and I said, look, I'm really sorry to tell you, but I think your kitchen is in the wrong place. And my lovely, lovely client said calls it her glug moment, because we then put the project back 9 months. We reapplied for planning. And we got planning to put the kitchen right into the bang in the middle of the house. And so we created a little house within a house. So this will just, I hope, make you feel excited just seeing the beauty of this incredible place. And you can sort of flick, that's the Beecham family, that's the photographs of him with his 7 children. Meanwhile, he was having an affair with a footman, I think. And then this is where, if you left your keys in your bedroom and you had to rush back on the school run, you'd have to run down the long gallery, up the 3rd staircase, down the west wing. So, it was definitely the right decision that we made. We opened up an old bridge over the moat, and we created this sort of charming house within a house. So this is the wonderful chapel, and it had the incredible arts and crafts moment, this house. So, and this is this famous staircase hall with these incredible crystal spindles on the stairs. And that was a courtyard that was covered over. And extraordinary, it was done by Lord Beecham, with black panelling with no windows. So quite weird, black panelling with no windows. You wouldn't think that would work as a room. But it does now, because it's so happy, and we've exorcised these dreadful ghosts. But all in, it has its spooky elements, but now you can keep going, because it's quite a lot of photographs. Sorry, I think I'm going to bore you with these photographs of their dogs. And then this is our drawing of the kitchen. And we took this enormous big reception room right at the middle of the house and made this fantastic kitchen. So you'll see it there, and then you'll see how it turned out. That was it, sort of halfway through. And then and it really is, it's one of the sort of happiest of all houses now. And I think because they wanted, we were balancing the history of the place and their desire to be normal and just, live like normal people and not be too grand. And it looks pretty grand, actually, doesn't it? Actually, let's be realistic. You can flick through. This is the oak bedroom, very, very haunted, but lovely, absolutely beautiful. Everything we put in there was white to try and lift it, every single chair and everything, all different types, shapes and things. That's a dressing room. You can keep going quite fast, because otherwise this is... Yeah, these were quite spooky rooms. The wisteria was all kind of growing through the windows, so in terms of the architecture and the relationship with us, the point about it is that we don't draw the architecture, we just quietly influence it. We think about how it's going to look from the inside and visualize it. Then we draw it together, and slowly, if everyone buys into the ideas, it affects the whole architecture of the place. So my next story, because we're going to have only just enough time, I think I get a bit carried away. I love my subject. We're back in Knightsbridge now, in London, and this was in Edgerton Crescent, a very lovely London crescent, very narrow houses, sort of the shape of a wedge of cheese, because they have to be in a crescent, if you like. And our challenge here is a very London challenge, which is that it's a very small floor plate on each floor. So each floor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 floors on top of each other, not connected to each other. And it's very difficult to live like that in London. You know, you feel very disparate from your rest of your family. And in fact, these people were even using an intercom telephone, you know, lunchtime. And so it's not an easy shape of house to deal with, and they're worth an awful lot of money. And so you want to have a successful layout. So what we did here was we drew these. What Marianne does so brilliantly is she turns them into watercolours at some point when we start thinking about colouring. So we were balancing traditional and contemporary. So it's wood panelled when you walk in, but it's contemporary wood panelling. And you look through to the kitchen. The kitchen is in the main part of the house again, the same theme of what happens now. Everybody really does want their kitchens to be right in the bang in the middle. I'll tell you what I did with this house was a lovely couple. He's from New Zealand, she's American. You know, I had to really try again and understand them and their way of life. They had 2 little girls. They love contemporary art. They wanted to be connected to their 2 little girls who actually then had a playroom downstairs. And so we did the same thing again. We took off the back of the house into enormous sheets of glass which pivoted, and we made a gallery in the kitchen so that then she could be in the kitchen, but she was galleried down to the level below. So she could be chatting with them, seeing what they were watching on telly, doing all that. And the house, which was so narrow, we put mirrors on both sides to try and make it wider. And then we had these big, enormous pivoting glass doors so that you felt like you were part of the garden. And again, we drew it, scribble, scribble, scribble. And then the ideas started to flow. And then the architect was fantastic and got permission for it. And it's something that we've repeated, and other people have repeated as well in London houses, to try and get away from this. The 2 challenges are you always have that double drawing room on the right as you walk in, or on the left, with the 2 fireplaces, and then you just have stair, and all these different levels. So that shows that the drawing room, this is a sort of a hallway drawing room. Another thing that often happens is this combining of rooms. And then this is looking through to the kitchen, through to the gallery at the back, and again through to the garden with the big glass doors. And then that's the glass doors shut and the dining room table, and that's them starting to open, where they start to do the pivot. And when they're literally full open, you hardly see them at all. So they're very. So that's that feeling there, and you can just see the glass, and you can lean over the glass and chat to the girls underneath, and make sure they're feeding the rabbit or something. And if you go on, that's then the garden from below, and that's the doors from below opening, but they're double height. Do you see? Yeah, exactly. And if you keep moving, you'll see this is standing back. You're now in this playroom. Again, we're juggling, balancing the fabric walling with the glass because of the acoustics mostly, to try and keep it warm and working. And now you get the feeling on the left-hand picture. You can see me. I think I was pregnant. Perhaps not. And I was standing down at the bottom, and then that's the owner up at the top. But that was really fun because then it's interacting with the garden as well. And of course they've got a Damien Hirst in the children's playroom. And keep going. And then we have Marianne's perspective here of how we conceived it at the beginning, and it's not far off it. It's pretty much the same thing. Amazing. And the famous panda chair, which I can't remember who made it. I can't. You can. Yeah. Anyway, then this is upstairs, the drawing room. It gives you an idea somehow. These are very contemporary pieces of furniture, rather aspirational, the sort of thing I'd love, but can't afford. And keep going, and then that's it, lovely. Anish Kapoor painting above the sofa. Julian Schnabel above the thing, lovely. You're making all the right noises. And then this is in the master bedroom. Yes.
Classical.
Yeah. Suddenly quite different sort of feel, a bit softer, easier. And that's just showing details of fabric walling and lovely marble basins. And this was fun too. In the roof, we took the ceilings out and went right up into the roof void and made lovely big sort of shutters and panelled roof. So, and then I'm going to finish with a quick whiz through a project in Sardinia, only because what this does is it illustrates something a little bit different about a relationship between architect and designer, which is that, we're all learning all the time, and the world of architecture is changing all the time, and the materials we're using are changing all the time. And so for us, I learn a lot from the architects I work with, and I'm so lucky to work with some of the very, very best. And we're doing a project near here, new build at the moment, where we're using, to completely rethink of a contemporary country house and using new materials. And this was a new build as well in Sardinia. Well, it was a rebuild. And it similarly had this feeling that the house had to sort of go with the landscape, use the natural materials, and we used very different way of building, because we were using basically a sort of polished concrete, but everything was concrete. Everything was sort of moulded out as if you were in a cave. So as you go flicking through, that's us doing our drawings, just working out. So did we get involved with the architecture? Yes, actually we did, because we were trying to work out what they wanted and taking a brief from the client and getting to know them. They wanted spaces, cosy little cottages where you had great privacy for your guests, and you each had your own little veranda. And so it just shows it. This is just after it had been built, but this shows all the different verandas and shows how we were working with the stones and with the things that the building didn't stick up and look kind of new and garish. It just rolled down the hill with these wonderful sort of stones. And so lovely old clay roofs, and you can just flick through, because I feel I'm outstaying my welcome now. I'm boring you to sobs with with it. So, but this shows the drawings and how they, yes, exactly. So just to get the feeling of how it would all work. And it's interesting doing jobs abroad too, because you need to be able to draw it all well and work with the architects. And then when you get sort of just probably one screen further, you start to see this concrete. All the floors were, well, a bit like this, but mould. All the benches were sort of moulded, all the beds, everything. Keep going. And these were all these lovely verandas and using the timbers. And that's a very gloomy day, cloudy day to have been photographing. But are we going too fast? Then this is an outdoor kitchen that we sketched up like that. And I think we have a photograph of what it looks like when it was finished. So not dissimilar. I think you can see that that it comes to life the way it was conceived. So this story is really about the natural materials and about the wood and the colours and the I think there you see something interesting. You see the polished concrete floor, and you see these enormous glass doors which disappear right into the structure, so you don't see them at all. Which is just very. It's very interesting working with new architects from overseas. They have different techniques, and it's a very good. It's a good, lovely learning curve, because then you can bring it back and rethink things you wouldn't have expected. So now we're nearing the end, I think, of our talk. I hope that it has given you sort of a bit of an insight into how we collaborate. The fact is that nearly always it's a happy collaboration, and even if the architects at the beginning of a project are just slightly prickly about who's going to lead the design, I would say always ends up that they're grateful for us being part of the team to help get to know the client better and understand how they're going to want it to feel, and to be able to take some of the lead on the interior side, even if it affects the exterior. They don't mind. It's a big collaboration. So I think if I end almost on that note. Well, don't end on that photograph. It really annoys me. Those taps are horrible. They were temporary. The new taps came later.
I think that's one of the most striking things about you, is your attention to detail.
Oh, do you think?
Yeah, I think it really fits the role to be able to call these various component parts into account.
Yes,
Absolutely,
and it takes a long time and a lot of effort. But I do have a fantastic team in London as well.
No doubt.
They're brilliant. So I think that's probably. That's it.
Thank you.